Oh, I didn't notice you there. I was still asleep from last night's episode of The Walking Dead. Welcome to Essential TV. I'm your host, Luke Watson, and you're not Carl. There's just one of me today. So, Roddy couldn't make it. You got me, but I've got you, and that's all that matters. So, we're going to talk about last night's episode of The Walking Dead, Season 7, Episode 14, The Other Side. And we'll also be talking about what is left in 2 episodes of Season 7 that we have coming up, what we want to see in the remainder of the season, and, what we want to see going forward. Season 8 is just around the corner. So, thank you for joining. Be sure to follow, be sure to share, and be sure to comment. Let me know what you thought of the last episode of The Walking Dead. Spoilers, if you haven't seen it, now's your chance to tune out. All right. So, as I said, last night's episode was Season 7, Episode 14, The Other Side, or as our friend Roddy has suggested, the Jesus and Maggie chain. Tealatoy says, the worst season ever so far. And when you say so far, keep in mind there's only 2 episodes left, so I think it's going to probably stay that way. SU Jagalum, The Other Side of the Pillow, kind of a snoozer. So, Ben, do we have our images in the background, or did you break that? Our friend Roddy will be joining us as a still image. So bring up the Jesus and Maggie chain, please, Ben. All right, there they are. So, last night's episode reminded me of a sort of Thelma and Louise if they really didn't like each other and they were on an assassination mission and if they were in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. It's all about Sasha and Rosita and, they were building towards this, but I have to say this was probably, I'm going to say it was my second least favorite episode, close to least favorite episode of the season so far. Tied maybe with the Oceanside episode, the Terra one. Only that one might actually be a little bit better in my opinion because at least we were meeting a new group and there was something interesting going on. And so we had some questions for that episode, but this one is just like there were no questions, there was no curiosity. It's just like these two are going on a mission to kill Negan. We all know it's not going to succeed, and that was basically it. So anyway, we got at the beginning of the episode, I got a tweet about girl power. Ben, do you have our girl power tweet? Yes. Oh no, girl power. Not for a whole episode. Yeah. So that was kind of, that sums it up nicely. It's good to have that in a little dose, but it definitely does not support an entire episode. Okay, and SU Jag, I agree. Several ridiculous things happened in this episode. Yeah, the whole episode was kind of an exercise in frustration, all right? Nothing really happened, nothing really went anywhere, but it just felt like filler. So anyway, we also got a good tweet, the Home Alone tweet. Ben, do you have that one? So whenever Sasha was looking at her master plan for how to infiltrate the Savior's compound, someone sent the Home Alone master plan, and it looks eerily similar to Sasha and Rosita's blueprint. And it made me think about what would it look like if we mashed up Home Alone and The Walking Dead. So internet, I want to see it. Make it happen. All right. Sarah says they need less filler episodes. They need to shorten the season. I'm starting to agree with that. There are 8 episodes in the first half of the season, then the mid-season finale and the break, and then 8 more episodes. And it feels like with The Walking Dead, there's really only enough good storyline for 8 episodes. The only difference I would say between this season and last season is that I feel like last season, an episode like this, they would have artificially extended 90 minutes. And at least they spared us from that last night. It was only a 60-minute episode. Cold Hands asked, imagine Rick waking up from his coma in the last episode and it was all just a dream. I know we've talked about that a couple times, and that is the ultimate FU ending for this show, or basically any show. So just real quick to run through the major developments in this episode. It was all about Rosita and Sasha and Abraham's awkward legacy, you know, what he's left behind between these two women, and the one thing they have in common besides our mustachioed friend is a desire to kill Negan, which again, we knew was not going to happen. Glitta the Gilf says, I cried though. Yeah, I mean, there were some good moments and it pulled at the heartstrings, but for the most part, it was just a little bit slow and meandering. The other big thing that came out of this episode is that Maggie and Daryl finally confronted each other after Glenn's death. So if you recall the season 6 season finale, the cliffhanger, Daryl is the one that got Glenn killed. And since the circumstances of that episode were such that they didn't really get to dwell on that after the fact, this was the first that Maggie and Daryl were brought together to really, you know, discuss this. And so Maggie forgave Daryl, does not blame him, even though she definitely should, because Daryl certainly got Glenn killed. Okay, Cold Hand says Eugene needs a good punch in the face. We will get to our friend Eugene. But yes, Maggie, Daryl, they're cool. And I mean, I guess for the sake of this show, that makes sense. But to me, it just seemed a little too easy. So episodes like this would be fine if there were more episodes per season, Kay says. So we got two competing ideas. We got, let's have less episodes per season so that it's all good, or have more episodes so that we can have filler and it feels okay. It's two polar opposite courses here. I would say consolidate the seasons personally. And then the other big revelation, which is not a revelation for anyone who knows the comic books, is that Jesus, through a throwaway line, he comes out as gay. So this character in the comic books, we've known for a long time that he is gay in the comic books. And in the press around the show, it's been basically known that this was going to happen. But if you've only watched the TV series, then this may have been a surprise. And it was also just such a throwaway thing. He mentions boyfriends, plural. And it's like, okay, great. Now that's happened and we can move on. And I mean, frankly, I wasn't paying that close of attention. I only really noticed it after the internet exploded over it. So good for you, internet, for picking up on that. And yes, we've got a debate happening on Periscope about Eugene. And I'm going to get to Eugene because there is a question about him. But real quick, before I get to Eugene, I wanted to bring up, okay, we'll bring up Eugene. Thanks, Ben. So Dr. Eugene Porter, chief engineer, also known as Negan, who I am, he seems mighty comfortable working for Negan already. And Tealatoy says, Rosita should have shot Eugene in the back. That's what he deserves. Do you guys really think that Eugene is Team Negan? Glitta says Eugene is brainwashed. Do you really believe that? Because I'm not so sure. I think that my personal sense is that he is, Cold Hand says he thinks he is the first lady now. He's got the hair for it. My personal sense is that Eugene is playing a long game and he's going to get revenge. He is the inside man, and yes, he is enjoying the pickles. Yes, he is enjoying the newfound authority, but I think that Eugene is certainly Team Rick through and through, and I think that ultimately he has a master plan at work here. And Tealatoy says, I didn't think so till last night. If he has a plan that he's in the midst of, certainly he's not going to run away with Rosita when given that chance. So I think I'm still Team Eugene. Sarah says Eugene is Team Eugene. And Smiley Lova says, I hope you're right. I think so. And our friend Roddy sent me his synopsis. He couldn't make it here today, but what he says is he's not falling for attempts to make us think Eugene is working to help the guy who killed Abraham. He's in there for the long game, and that long game does not include escaping with Rosita. And so when he mentioned that to me, that really cinched it in my mind, because keep in mind, Eugene and Abraham were as tight as peas and carrots, except for that one thing where Eugene beat him, or Abraham beat him up for the whole lying about being a scientist. Yeah, I don't think that Eugene would side with the guy who killed Abraham his protector and his best friend. Cold Hands asks, you think he is like Snape to Dumbledore? Points for mixing Harry Potter into the mix, but yes, I think. But I don't think I don't think it's planned. I think that he just found himself in this situation and he's adapted to it. And Angela and Julian says, I'm hoping Eugene has a plan. Maybe he didn't want to leave and have a manhunt on for him like Daryl does. That's also a very good and practical point. If Eugene took off, then it's just going to rile things up. And certainly it would tip off Negan that there is a plan afoot, because Eugene is not the kind of guy that would be able to escape on his own. So there's that to consider. Anyway, my big question is, will we find out this season, or will this continue, because there's only 2 episodes left? Glitta says he's going to shoot Rosita. I don't know. I hope not. I wouldn't expect Eugene to shoot anyone. So I did like that we saw him creating his metalhead walkers that he talked about before. And yeah, he had his puppet, his monkey puppet in his pocket. He's got his evil guy black trench coat on. You know, he's playing the part. So anyway, let's move back to Stephen Ogg as Simon. So this was another highlight of the episode. Basically, anytime this guy is on screen, it's a highlight. So Stephen Ogg plays the character of Simon, the savior who's always talking to Gregory and visiting the Hilltop. Those of you who are video game fans will also recognize him as Trevor from Grand Theft Auto. So this guy is just amazing at chewing the scenery. My favorite line last night when he was talking about, he was talking to the doctor, when he was stealing the doctor, says, "You like ice cream? We have ice cream." So this guy knows how to win you over. And yeah, Roddy had said that he's the most interesting part of the show, and notice that he's starting to speak like Negan. And he's also excellent opposite of Gregory. And so I like when those two play off of each other. And yeah, he has a history of gruesome on-screen deaths, because you might recall he played John Connor's father in the Terminator 2 movie, and he was dispatched by Robert Patrick's T-1000. So one of these days, Simon is going to bite it, and it'll be good. And then we'll miss him, because he's kind of filling that void that Abraham left for just the funny, out-of-context, one-line comedic relief. So, oh, the question of who we saw at the end with the crossbow, was it Daryl or Dwight? That is one of our remaining questions. And that is my next point. Rosita sees Dwight or Daryl's outline. We see a guy with a crossbow. Oh, Cold Hands, we'll get back to that. What do you think will be Carol's next move? I'm not sure about that. Come back to me on that. I'm going to forget this comment in the meantime. So real quick on the silhouette, obviously Dwight is the poor man's Daryl. He has taken the vest, he's taken the crossbow, he's got the hair thing going, and from a distance you can't really tell the difference, as we see here. You will note that the crossbow that is over this silhouette shoulder is different than the crossbow we saw in Daryl's hand earlier in the episode. So there's one thing. Daryl has a new crossbow since the one that Dwight took from him. And the other thing is just simply that Dwight, as far as we know, is at the sanctuary with the saviors. And as far as we know, Daryl is not, unless they're playing some kind of time jumping thing, where what we saw with Rosita last night actually takes place a little after the stuff we saw with Daryl at the Hilltop. So yeah, theoretically it could be Daryl, but for the most part it seems pretty obvious it's Dwight to me. So I guess the next question is, will this be where Dwight joins Team Rick? Will he help Rosita to assassinate Negan, or will he stay Negan himself? Oh, and Boss Jones says, forget all that, it's all about Iron Fist. I haven't watched Iron Fist yet. I take it that you liked it. All the critics have been pretty brutal on it. But I don't know, let me know if I should start that binge. I'm weary to commit to 13 episodes whenever it's getting mixed reviews. Yes. So anyway, I think it's pretty clearly Dwight. They could just be messing with us, and I'm wondering what's next, because I think inevitably we all expect that Dwight will turn on Negan. And this certainly seems like a really good chance, so we'll see. Some random notes from Roddy he wanted to share with us. He noticed that the cheesiness is on the rise. There's a lot of overly dramatic music and reactions lately this season. And he wasn't particularly invested in the Rosita and Sasha storyline. He said that the best thing that happens, because we expect Sasha will die, is that Negan tortures and kills her in an interesting way. So that's our Scottish friend who tends to rile people up. But I tend to agree, because we all expect that Sasha will not make it past this season, simply because she's been cast as the lead role in the new Star Trek series, which we've mentioned week after week after week, just waiting and hinting at the fact that she's going to die. And so it seems obvious that her mission will fail, and she's not going to make it. She's done. So another thing that might be worth noting, Rosita, Christian Serratos, who plays Rosita, is pregnant. So if ever there was a time for her to exit the show, seems pretty convenient that she would do it now. So there's a very good chance that both of our dynamic duo, our Thelma and Louise, are going to exit the series within the next 2 episodes. I would fully prepare for that. And I think it's kind of, for a season finale to have a big impact, I think that especially after the Glenn and Abraham death, it feels like a 1-2 punch of losing these 2 characters whose names we actually know for a change. Would probably be necessary to making the season feel like it's ending on a big crescendo. And Cold Hands asks, is Judith self-babysitting meanwhile? She's almost old enough to self-babysit. I think that in the post-apocalyptic world, a toddler is officially old enough to take care of itself. John C. Danzo says, regarding Sasha and Rosita, I hope not, in terms of them dying. We need one at least. I mean, we still have Maggie, and we still have Carol, so there's still going to be a female presence on the show, but we are going to start running a little low on the females if they kill off both of them in one or 2 episodes. And Boss Jones is saying, yes, watch Iron Fist, man. I'm going to get around to it. I'll tell you a secret. I still haven't watched Luke Cage, so I think I'm going to binge that first. All right. Yes. And Sarah says, especially since they generally kill the men off. Yeah, it would be, I think that maybe because this season began with Glenn and Abraham dying, how do you end in a way that might be as impactful or more than that? And probably not as impactful as the actual brutal, bashing in of the skulls that we saw. But I think having 2 women killed might be a little bit more shocking. So yeah, I would fully expect that to happen before the end of the season. Or even if it doesn't happen this season, they're captured and it's set up for the beginning of next season. S.U. Jagalum agrees. I think they both die. And yes, Cold Hands, I do have Lucille. So you better watch your language. All right. So what is left? What are the dangling plot threads? What are the things that we have left in 2 episodes of season 7? First of all, we have the kingdom. Let's pull up the kingdom. Yes. Is Ezekiel going to join the fight? He's pretty much verbally committed after Richard's martyrdom in the episode before the last one. It seems like the kingdom's on board. And let's see. Angela and Julian says, well, on Talking Dead, they did say we are going to lose a main character in the finale, so I think it will be Sasha, but I hope not. It very well could be both. And Ben, I'm aware that is a lion, not a tiger, but good effort. All right. Can Carol take up the slack for all the women? And what about Enid? Can she make it as a top female, John asks. I forgot about Enid. Ben, you and your zoo animals, you're on notice. But we do need to get a virtual tiger because it will certainly be more realistic than that green screen deer we saw a couple episodes ago if we do. Yes, but John, to answer your question, Carol can take up any slack because she's Carol. Basically, if she decided tomorrow to wipe out Negan, she could do it as a one-woman wrecking crew. So she's also on our list. But first, before we get to Carol, we've got the kingdom. I expect them to come on board. They might not join the fight officially in the last 2 episodes, but at least they're going to commit and we're going to see them mobilize. I think. Last time we saw Ezekiel, he was just kind of chilling. He was going to rest on it, but he told Morgan that they were ready. And Sarah says, do we think war will start by end of the season? I think that Sasha and Rosita will be the ones to start the war. It will be a failed attempt on Negan's life, and unfortunately that means that they will be tipping off Negan that there are attempts on his life. And yeah, it's not a good strategy. While Rick is working so hard to line up allies, these two have gone rogue, and they're just going to make the job harder. But I think that the war will start, but I'm afraid we're not going to see much of it. It feels like in only 2 episodes, we're not going to get much of a war. We're going to see the first shots fired, and I think it's going to be, I think it will probably end up being a cliffhanger like the Terminus cliffhanger, where it's not like the season 6, you know, someone dies and we don't see who, but I think it's going to be, we find ourselves in a really bad situation, and you know, the suspense is up here, and we're ready for the season premiere to come back, and the war is then. And SU Jag agrees, says war's next season, and Colin something said in Bigger Threats. Oh, and Glitta the Gilf pointed out, I'm sorry for Michonne. I neglected to mention her when we talked about our remaining fierce females. Yes, obviously Michonne, between Michonne and Carol and Maggie, and let's say Enid, let's just throw her in the mix. What's the 4th one matter? Yeah, so after we lose Sasha and Rosita, there's still plenty of females holding down the fort. All right, so, and Onale says next season we'll see the fight. I think that is likely the case. So, Tara, so you guys, that's why I keep you around, for fact-checking me. There are a lot of characters in this show, so thank you, SU Jag. And that leads me to my next point, Oceanside, which is Tara's vacation spot of choice, which we only saw in 1 episode previously. And yes, we know there's a bunch of guns there, and there's a bunch of angry women that are ready to kill people there. So Ben, can you pull up Oceanside? Because this is the other dangling plot thread. From the preview for next week's episode, unless the preview is actually a combination of the next 2 episodes, which very well could be the case, it looks like we're going to see Oceanside next. And it looks like Tara finally takes Rick there, you know, and explains this stupid secret she's been keeping to herself. Tila Toy, also known as Camp Crystal Lake, absolutely. It definitely gives me that vibe. And I will be very disappointed if somebody is not wearing a hockey mask at Oceanside. And John says Oceanside will fall. Well, at least if they give us the guns, it'll be okay. So we're going to finally go back. Are they going to get on board? Are they going to be another thorn in the side? Are they going to be victims of Negan? I don't know. I just know that after that episode that was entirely focused on Tara going to Oceanside, they really owe us something. You know, they need to come into the story in a meaningful way, because otherwise investing an entire episode in that is going to be a real tease. So, Sarah says, they might just join the fight. I think that's the case. So speaking of other people that might join the fight, other potential allies, we've got the Heapsters. We got Jadis and the Heapsters and all their tetanus and, yes, the trash pile people, SU Jag says. So we know that Rick brought them from his carnival, from his fun fair. He brought them some prizes. He brought them lots of guns. And I've been saying for a few weeks now, I kind of want to see a twist where these guys actually betray Rick and go Negan, because what do we really know about them? Very little. They talk funny, they make art out of garbage, they have way too much time on their hands. SU Jag says, I don't trust them. And Rick just hands over a bunch of guns because he looks at them and says, hey, here's an army. I think that it would really be an interesting twist if they turned around and they said, oh, the Saviors are really bad and you need help to defeat them. Why don't we just team up with them? Because that sounds like a better plan. And by the way, thanks for the guns, stupid. So I don't know if that's going to happen. It feels to me like the show is not going in that direction, but that is a twist that I secretly want to see happen just because it keeps things interesting. You know, otherwise it's going to be what? The Kingdom, Oceanside, the Heapsters, Alexandria, everyone against the Saviors. It just feels like too much. It feels like, can't we just give the Saviors one ally? Don't they deserve that? Don't they deserve some friends? And SU Jag says, we have no background on them, right? And that is correct. And John asks, where's the Merle hand? The Merle hand is always close by. But since there's no reference to Merle in this episode, I've just been keeping it here, waiting for you to mention it. Keeping me on point. All right. Angela says, I don't trust the garbage people at all. And SU Jag says, I think the only group where we haven't had some sort of view. And the Heapsters, or the Garbage Pail Kids, or whatever you want to call them, they are original to the show, so there's no analog in the comic book. So we really don't know. They are an X factor. And I really like when the show introduces characters or storylines that don't exist in the comic books, because it keeps us on our toes. Because, you know, I loosely follow the comic books, and I really hate spoilers. And so the fact that Daryl does not exist in the comic books is great, because therefore any storyline that has to do with Daryl, I don't know where it's going to go. And knowing the broad strokes of the story is bad enough. But entering the story with these X factors, these variables, like I said, they could turn on Alexandria for all we know. It keeps us interested, even if we know even loosely what's going on in the comic books. So I'm into the Heapsters. They're weird. They talk funny, but they're going to surprise us. Or they're not going to surprise us at all, and they're just going to help and be cannon fodder. And Sarah says, but the comics are so good. I'm not caught up in the comics, but yeah, the comics are good. But I like when the comics and the TV show are different, because then you get two different Walking Dead stories. And it's like, instead of repeating the storyline, you get to enjoy two different things. The same thing can be said for Game of Thrones. The fact that when Game of Thrones, the TV show, started to move away from the books, it became much more interesting, because now you have double the Game of Thrones to enjoy. So I really like it when they take the larger inspiration, the bigger things that we know are tried and true and really good storylines, but when they put a new twist on it. And John says, there is another group yet to be introduced that may change things. John, do you think that's going to be a next season thing? Because at this point, it feels like there's no more time to introduce another group. And Sarah says, too soon for that, John. So, and I think I know who you're talking about. SU Jag says, they're like the freaking Borg. Do you mean the Heapsters? Augmenting with garbage? I would like to see that. All right. So what's left? Gregory from the Hilltop is still an X Factor as well. If we know the comic books, we have a very good idea of what's going to happen with the Hilltop and Gregory. I won't spoil it for those of you who don't know the comic books, but he certainly is, he's in play. And he's always just like one sentence away from betraying the group and giving up Maggie and giving up Rick and Alexandria and all of that. So John says Gregory needs to be taken out. And it could happen before the end of the season. There's only 2 episodes left, and I expect probably some resolution with his storyline in what's remaining. Maybe not. But that's one of my predictions for the next 2 episodes. Gregory's storyline comes to something big and meaningful. Whether he dies, whether he betrays, something's going to happen. Only says snake in the grass. Yeah, absolutely. But he's got a nice office. It's well decorated, well appointed, and you know, that's a big chair to fill for someone. And I'll leave it at that. All right. So moving on to who's after Gregory. We've got Eugene. We already talked about Eugene and whether we think that he will betray or whether he's the secret agent. I say secret agent. I am Team Mullet all the way. SU Jag, real quick before we move too far away, what do you think will come of the doctor? Listen, it was really dumb of Negan to kill the doctor he had. But since he has a spare that he can just take from the Hilltop, I guess it's no big deal. But yeah, listen, what happens if the one that you stole from the Hilltop dies? What happens if he gets sick or something happens? You don't kill doctors in the apocalypse. Doctors are like the new currency. So what do you think will happen? I think that they're going to have to rescue the doctor. Maggie's pregnant. She needs a doctor. So, yeah, we're in short supply. And that's another really interesting storyline to explore, that you have a couple key pieces. It's like playing chess, and a doctor's a very valuable piece on the on the playing field. And so what happens with him, I don't know, but certainly it should be a major point of contention. Okay. And Angela in Julian says, oh my God, Gregory just needs to be killed off already. He's a snake, a coward, and untrustworthy. You may get what you're asking for. 2 episodes. 2 episodes. Is it next episode? Is it the one after? Is it season 8? I think you're going to get it eventually. All right, and yeah, and someone, I'm sorry, I missed your name, said, I didn't realize the doctors were brothers. That was a minor thing that was, if you're really paying close attention, what is it, Dr. Carson? It was mentioned, both of them were referred to as Dr. Carson. And so it was easy to figure out that the doctor at the Hilltop and the doctor that was recently killed at the sanctuary were brothers. So whenever they killed that doctor, a lot of people, Negan mentioned something about having another doctor or having a spare, and a lot of people thought that he was talking about Eugene, because Eugene was being called Dr. Smarty Pants, but he was actually referring to the doctor from the Hilltop. So just one of those easy things to miss. All right, so Eugene, I think Eugene is Team Rick, and I think he himself, just like Rosita and Sasha are on a mission to get revenge for Abraham, I think Eugene is as well. And we have seen Eugene man up more in the last season than we have in a long time. So I think he's on a growth trajectory. And so I think Eugene, I think he's on our side. Onalay says Eugene's a sleeper. I think so. Could be wrong, because he's probably never had power, and power goes to your head, or so I'm told. All right, and we got a tweet. One of our viewers or followers on Essential Dead. What was the tweet? It was, I can't read because the light's in the way, but wants Eugene to die. Yes, I want more action, all this talking. That is what The Talking Dead is for. Oh, and I want Eugene to die. I agree with the first point, but don't you touch a hair on Eugene's head. We're keeping him around, because after Abraham died, we need a little bit of comic relief. And yeah, and John says, will Simon take out Gregory? Speaking of comic relief, as long as they keep Simon and Eugene around, I'm happy. Maybe. That'd be a good way for it to happen, because I feel like it's either going to happen from within, where the Hilltop people take Gregory out themselves because he's not trustworthy and he will betray them, or Simon will simply take out Gregory, whether it's because, you know, he finds Maggie hiding there, or Daryl, or something like that, or because, I don't know, he forgot to give him a melon, whatever it is. I think Gregory's days are numbered, but I think he's going to have a really interesting death, because when The Walking Dead builds up a character that everyone hates, they really owe it to us to give us a big payoff and a really torturous, violent death. So, Gregory, no offense, but we're really looking forward to you dying. All right, and especially since Gabriel has kind of turned around. I was waiting for Gabriel to have a really horrific death whenever everyone hated his guts, but now that he's kind of coming around, Gregory might get us through. All right, so, and this is a big one, Dwight. Dwight is another dangling plot thread, and Roddy had suggested he's really looking forward to Dwight versus Daryl, the original versus the imitator, and yeah, Dwight. I think it's clear that Dwight is going to shift sides. Last we saw him, he was still Negan, but Sherry was really kind of pushing him, pushing his buttons. Gave up on him because he had embraced being Negan. And so I think we're going to see something in the next 2 episodes with Dwight where he finally commits. And if that was his silhouette, which I really think it was, that Rosita saw, then it's very likely that maybe this will be his opportunity to join forces with Rosita and help to take out Negan. Or maybe he simply sticks on Team Negan and he turns in Rosita or kills her himself. We'll see. But in the meantime, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I really like the fact that Daryl has an arch nemesis, because Daryl has been the coolest, most trademarkable character in the show. You know, he's got his trademark vest, which Dwight stole. He's got his trademark crossbow, which Dwight stole. And he's got his trademark motorcycle, which Dwight stole. And I'm not even going to get started on the hair. And so for him to have this arch nemesis, it's about time, because it felt like for a few seasons, Daryl was just going to be left behind and neglected and just sort of coast along on the coolness that he had built up in previous seasons. So when they introduced this dynamic between the two, where Dwight is really kind of chasing after Daryl, who he is and what he represents, and then they had that back and forth, the betrayal thing that ended with the scene where Dwight kills Denise. And and then whenever, of course, he shoots Daryl, it's good. I like those two going at each other. And so I personally, as much as it would be nice to see this storyline come to a head and Dwight either join our side or stick with Negan, do whatever he's going to do, I hate to see him join Team Rick or even side against Negan, even if it's Team Dwight himself, because I really like the idea of Dwight and Daryl being on opposite sides of each other. Daryl needs an arch nemesis. We need arch nemeses in this show. It keeps things very interesting. And Lori says Eugene is on Rick's side. I hope that is the case. Dwight will fall by Daryl's hand, John says. He might. He very well might. And again, as I've mentioned, Daryl is an original character for the TV show. So even though Dwight exists in the comic books, we don't really know what's going to happen with Daryl in this show. He's always one of these X factors that keeps it so that even if you've read the comics, you don't really know. SU Jag says, I prefer Dwight stays on his own side and remains hated by Daryl. I'm with you. I'd kind of like to see him go against Negan, but if he does, I don't really want him to fully commit to being on Team Rick, just because having that animosity is a good thing, I feel. And maybe Sherry will be something to stay between them if she ever resurfaces again in the storyline. And that brings me to my next point. Sherry, will she resurface? The last time we saw anything about her, she was leaving a note for Dwight, basically giving up on him. She's the one that helped Daryl escape. She's really, I think she's going to be a driving force between Daryl and Dwight going forward, whether she's ever present or not. John says, crossbow v. crossbow. Yes, that's what we want to see. Oh, SU Jagalum says, I'd love to see her as a walker. Yes, that's one of the best ideas I've heard in a while. What if she resurfaces and when we find her, she just happens to be some walker chilling, eating somebody's brains? We don't see enough of that in this show. We don't see enough characters that we actually know turn into walkers. And I think that, and he said, S.U. Jagalum says, only because I think that'll trigger Dwight, I'm assuming you said. Maybe it was Daryl. I think you said Dwight. The walkers have become almost laughable at this point in the series. They're just so easily killed. They're basically not a threat. You know, I've said, like, whatever the disease is that turns you into a walker must also rot your skull, because, man, these skulls just crush easily. Every knife and blunt object just goes right through a skull. And the walkers are becoming almost like George Romero, Dawn of the Dead kind of walkers, where you could throw a pie in their face and they're nothing. And the only time they're ever a threat is in massive, massive herds. And even then, I think we're now desensitized, so we don't really care. But how do you fix that? Well, you give them some meaning. You have a character that you know that other characters care about come back as a walker. It's like one of my favorite moments in the entire series is when Daryl finds the Merle walker. And it's Merle, it's Michael Rooker, and he's got the hand, and he's chewing on some, Woodbury guy. That is a major, major milestone in Daryl's development, and we don't see enough of that. It is an underutilized tactic. S.U. Jaglum says, the walkers are a joke now, except for in Fear the Walking Dead. Yeah, but Fear the Walking Dead is set previous to this, so that it's in a world that has not yet adapted to the walkers. So yeah, listen, no matter what happens in the next 2 episodes, no matter what happens in Season 8, My one request to the writers, to the showrunners, to the producers of The Walking Dead is let's make walkers great again, okay? Everyone get hats made. Make walkers great again. Let's make them a threat. Let's make us care about the walkers. Because yes, we all know we are the Walking Dead, and we all know that the real threat, there are other groups, there are other humans out there, and it's Negan. But come on, let's get back to the walkers actually mattering in the show. Taylor Toy says the show is on a decline. After this season, it's time to finish the series. Don't let AMC's shareholders hear that, because they are counting on The Walking Dead to last forever. Hashtag make walkers great again. Thank you, Smiley Lova. Thank you. All right. Oh, John C. Danzo, Zombie Sherry takes out Dwight. That would be good. And Angela and Julian says, whatever happened to Heath? Yes. That is another character that could come back as a walker, but probably won't, because Corey Hawkins played Heath, and Corey Hawkins is he's a really good actor on an upward trajectory in his career. So he was in Straight Outta Compton, he played Dr. Dre. What was he just in? Oh, he was just in Kong, Skull Island. This man has career options. And so he was cast as Heath in The Walking Dead, which is a character that's in the comics. And they barely used him. They barely did anything with him. They really never developed him. And then he was cast as the lead role in 24 Legacy, the spin-off of 24, the reboot series. And SU Jag says, I think he'll get recast. I don't think so. I think they'll just forget about him if they don't bring him back. But yeah, the episode with Tara and Oceanside was the last we saw him. They got separated. And at the end, Tara sees a walker that looks like it could be Heath. It has a similar hairstyle. Turns out it's not him. And then she sees like tire tracks, and there's some mysterious like pass for a door, like an RFID door tag. And there's some stupid throwaway line where she says to herself, like, I sure hope this was you, Heath, and that we meet again someday. That's not what they said, but that's what the writers would do in this show. And so there's a very good chance that if 24 Legacy does not get renewed for a second season, they might bring him back. Because yeah, The Walking Dead might be on the decline as far as critics are concerned, and even the ratings are suffering based on where they were a year ago. But it is still the biggest show on cable. And so listen, it's good to have options, and the creators of the show know that Corey Hawkins as an actor is a huge get for their show. And so they're going to keep hope alive that if he can come back, he will come back. But I would request that if he's just a dangling plot thread, just give us a walker. Make him come back as a walker. Give us that, please. We haven't seen that for a long time. All right, so Ben is staring at me through the window because we haven't changed the image for a while. You make it sound like The Walking Dead is a career ender. No, it's not a career ender. It's just that in many ways it's a career amplifier, because it was a great role for him, but at the same time he was getting all these movie roles. And so if he can't keep up with the movie roles, which in the industry is generally considered a step up, he could come back to The Walking Dead and it's still pretty good. It's not a career ender. It's just that certainly if he can be the star of movies, that's better for him as an actor. All right. Oh, and John says she found broken glasses. I didn't remember that. Okay, so moving on. Sasha, again, we think she's going to die. She's, speaking of actors and careers, she's going to be the lead in the new Star Trek series. Again, maybe they'll have her be captive or prisoner so that if the new Star Trek series doesn't take off, she can come back. She's certainly become a major part of the show and a pretty, a useful character to have around. So they might not kill her. They might just put her aside so that she could either be dead or not dead. But given the way that this storyline is progressing with her trying to kill Negan, I think that most likely they have to kill her. I don't think they can leave this dangling like they did with Heath. And then there's also Rosita, and the fact that the actress is pregnant. And so if you're going to take time off, now's the time. So there's a very good chance both of them don't make it through the next 2 episodes. Yes, and Sarah says all these actors are getting career boosts from being in the show. A lot of them were unknowns. That's true. A lot of these actors, even if you are a minor character in The Walking Dead, it gives you such geek cred that worst case, you get to do like the Comic-Con circuit for the rest of your life, signing autographs for $50 a pop. So worst case, you get a minor role in The Walking Dead, you're going to get a lot of exposure, and a lot of fans are going to recognize you for a long time. But being recognizable from the biggest TV show on cable is a good thing, people. Sasha in flashbacks like Tyrese, John asked. I'm not sure what you mean there. I guess, are you asking that if she dies, we could still see her in flashbacks? Because that's possible as well. I'm still waiting for some good flashbacks to like Abraham or Merle, because these are actors I really enjoyed, and I missed them from the show. And I really liked when Tyrese was dying and it wasn't a flashback, it was a hallucination to the governor. That was great. And certainly as long as Sasha is in the show, we could have a flashback or a hallucination of Tyrese, and we could bring Chad Coleman back, which I would like to see. But if she dies, I think we're done with any sort of flashbacks to Tyrese. I think he's completely gone to us. Not like he'd come back in a meaningful way, but it's nice. It's nice to see that from time to time. So who else is left? Oh yeah, there's Carol. And SU Jag says, I thought we would have gotten some of Glenn. Yeah, we still could. You know, Maggie's pregnant. She's got this baby coming, and if there's ever going to be a time to flash back to Glenn, it's when that story becomes a little bit more developed. So Carol is still in the mix, and she now knows what happened with Negan and the Saviors, killing Glenn, killing Abraham, killing the other Alexandrians. She knows that there's a war coming, and she is a one-woman wrecking crew. So she's in the mix. Is she going to come back to Alexandria? Is she going to go after Negan herself? Because, you know, Rosita and Sasha going after Negan themselves seems like a foolish plan. Carol, on the other hand, maybe she could do it. You saw what she did at Terminus. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with her. I don't know if they'll get to her in the next 2 episodes, though, because it feels like she's been a side story. And yes, Carol is smarter, SU Jag says. Absolutely. Carol has always had it together since, I'd say, like end of season 3, season 4. She's really had this whole world figured out. And John says, I still think Enid will play a bigger role if and when Sasha go. I think so too. They're setting Enid up for a bigger role. They're setting her up to be the romantic interest with Carl. So I don't think Enid's going anywhere. And who knows? Right now she's just a young girl, doesn't seem terribly helpful. But remember Carol, she used to be just an abused housewife that nobody expected anything from. Oh, and someone, I missed the name, said, I think that Carol will help the kingdom to get ready. Yeah, Carol could train an army at the kingdom. And between her and Morgan, that's what they need, because these people are just grossly unequipped. You know, Richard was the only one that really had it figured out and knew this war was inevitable. But the rest of the kingdom, they need some coaches. And who would be better than Coach Carol? All right, and of course, the big one, what is going to happen with Negan? Okay, no spoilers from the comic books, because there is a Negan storyline in the comic books. I can suggest what I think is going to happen based on that. But I guess I still feel like the things that happen in the comic books with Negan are probably going to happen eventually. My question is how soon? And it all comes down to the war. Boss Jones says Negan will be fine. And I think he will be fine for a while. I really don't think in 2 episodes we're going to get a real war. I think we're going to see shots fired, literally shots fired from Sasha at Negan that's going to set off the war. And it's going to be some kind of big, a cliffhanger, not like the season 6 cliffhanger, but a cliffhanger in the sense of now we're primed and ready, and aren't you excited for season 8 because it's going to start with the war and it's going to be about the war. And Sarah agrees. I think they're going to just start the war for the end of this season. I think that that's all they can do. There's only 2 episodes left. And there's too many things to wrap up and put into place so that all the pieces are on the field ready to go. So I don't think Negan's going anywhere this season. I think it's just going to be a matter of he comes to the realization that all of these groups that he has providing for him are a threat. So that's most likely what is going to be the finale of season 7. And hopefully it comes back strong in season 8. And maybe they'll even do a time jump where there have been confrontations between the groups. I don't know. I think we're due for a time jump in the show. Season 8 will be a steady war-filled season, John says. I hope so. They've been setting it up for so long, it feels like They really need to deliver. Tila Toy asks, who will decide if Negan is killed or imprisoned? I guess that depends on who defeats him ultimately, because certainly a lot of people would gladly kill him. And I think that the Morgans of the world would rather imprison him. And we've seen that. We saw that with the flashback to the Morgan Goat episode that was 90 minutes long, where Morgan went from being crazy to being a pacifist. He learned from Eastman not to just simply kill your enemies. So I think that is the setup for what's going to happen with Negan, and maybe Morgan is the decider. I don't know. Sarah says this was a filler season. I tend to agree. And unfortunately, I tend to agree that season 6 was as well. So it feels like there's 2 filler seasons, and season 8 really has to deliver. John asks, if Negan falls, who takes over the Saviors? Hopefully Eugene. That's not a serious comment, but hopefully Eugene. But maybe Dwight. You know, who's left? Who do we know? Simon, it depends on what the condition is. So Angela and Julian says Simon. You know, if they are defeated and there needs to be a management team put in place, a puppet government that is friendly to our heroes, then it will maybe be Dwight if he's the one that helps Sasha and Rosita. But if not, if it just becomes the next Negan in line, it's going to be Simon. So we'll see. Tila Toy asks, why are they using entire seasons as fillers? You know, your guess is as good as mine. SU Jag says, we have to have a war to save the show. The walkers aren't a threat, so we need excitement from somewhere. Yes, absolutely. But if they make the walkers a threat, and a way they could do that, besides walkerizing some people we know, is weaponizing them. That's another thing that this show has teased many, many times. Weaponizing the walkers. You know, we saw the governor in Woodbury when he pulled that truck full of walkers up to the gate of the prison. Like, that was a cool idea. And the show's never really capitalized on it. The Wolves hinted at that, and then they were completely abandoned as a storyline. So I would love to see, like, Alexandria and Rick and the whole crew use the walkers as weapons. Maybe Eugene will be the guy that weaponizes the walkers for the Saviors. I don't know, but, like, let's put them into the game. Let's put them into the mix. Yeah, and SU Jag says, kind of like what Eugene is doing. He puts the metal over their heads. Like, that's smart and that's interesting. Even what the Heapsters did with Winston the Death Metal Walker, where they had them all spiked up. They're hinting at doing something with the walkers. Just do it already, guys. You know, we've been waiting all these seasons. Brian says an army of Winslows would be cool. Absolutely. Talk about striking fear into the heart of your enemy. It's like, yeah, you could pull a truck full of walkers up to your enemy's gate, but if they look like that guy, that's cool, and that's scary. And that's not easy to kill because their squishy skulls are protected by metal and spikes. All right, so yeah, that's basically what I have for what's left in the season. And I don't know. Tweet at us in the meantime. We'll be back next week at 5 o'clock on Monday, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. And, you know, this episode was not a good one in my opinion. And I think the show really needs to up their game in the final 2 episodes. Let's save Season 7. Hashtag save Season 7. All right. Tomorrow, I will be back with my friend Joe Grazi. We're going to do a movie show. We're going to talk about Kong Skull Island. We'll talk about Logan. Tila Toy just now asking, where's Joe? Tune in tomorrow, 5 Eastern Time. Joe will be back. We're going to talk movies with you. So thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Boss Jones. The music is by Luca Signorelli. Look him up. And keep on walking, everyone. Hashtag save Season 7.